Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we got some new cards. I'm sure everyone's used to that phrase by now. Yes, we got more new cards that have come out. I'm sure people are just adapting to the massive impact that Modern Horizons 3 has had on the format. But we already got new cards that we need to be talking about, and, you know, as I've sort of alluded to in videos recently, I'm going to probably be talking about new cards a little bit less than I normally would on my channel, but we still got to talk about them, right? Of course, they are still going to affect the Commander format, and a lot of my viewers have commented on my videos are like, yeah, I don't even pay attention anymore. The only reason I know these cards are coming out is because I see them on your videos, and so that's a big reason why I'm doing it. We got Assassin's Creed, so that's a Universes Beyond set, which again, there's a lot of people out there that don't really pay attention to the Universes Beyond stuff at all either. So another reason why I'm bringing up some of these cards, this video is essentially the cards that I think you should be aware of, right? That's likely what I will be doing going forward, is just bringing up the cards that I think are impactful in the Commander format that, you know, you should be aware they exist, but also maybe, you know, I'll bring up something here that you might actually want to add to one of your decks. There is some unique, interesting cards from this set, without a doubt. And of course, if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, you might find them even more interesting. Let's start out with a couple of great reprints here. Black Market Connections, obviously, when this card came out, became I would say a Commander staple. You know, it's a heavy word to use, but I would say it's definitely a Commander staple. As soon as it was printed, definitely could use a reprint. It's a really popular card, pretty expensive one as well. A lot of people are excited about Reconnaissance being reprinted. Finally, I'm quite certain this is the first time it's ever been reprinted. Maybe there was a secret layer drop. Obviously, a good reprint as far as flavor goes. I think, you know, I'm not an Assassin's Creed guy. I'm not really a big video game guy in general. I will just say, I think the flavor of this set feels really good, and Reconnaissance, I mean, Black Market Connections as well, but Reconnaissance seems like a really appropriate reprint for this set. 1 white mana enchantment, pay 0, remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. A very important effect in a lot of decks, most notably in any deck where you have an attack trigger on your commander, because you can just freely attack with your commander, get that trigger, and then just remove your creature from combat. It's like a reverse Maze of Ith, right? You just remove your creature from combat, so you don't have to worry about it dying at all. So obviously a really great card. I wouldn't say it sees a ton of play in the Commander format, but it definitely is one that is nice to see as a reprint. All right, getting to the new cards here, and I'll just tell you right now, all you Assassin's Creed fans, I apologize ahead of time. I'm going to butcher a lot of these names, I'm sure. Well, I'm going to butcher a few of them. Definitely when I get to the Commanders, I'm going to be butchering a bunch of names there. I'll be doing the Commanders in a different video, and whoo boy, some of those names. Anyway, the Aesir Escape Valhalla. I'm not sure what that means. It's a saga, 2 and a green. Exile a permanent from your graveyard. You gain life equal to its mana value. Okay, so we're gaining life here. That's not bad. Always good in every Commander game. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on target creature you control equal to the mana value of the exiled card. Okay, so probably we want to be exiling something big from our graveyard, which for green is usually not that big of an issue. So if we exile a 6, now we have 6 life gain, and we also put 6 counters on a creature. That's pretty darn good. Then Chapter 3, return the Aesir Escape Valhalla and the exiled card to owner's hand. Okay, so we get that card back, and we also get this back, and we get to use it again and do it all over again. Wow, that seems pretty fantastic, right? Where does this exactly fit? Life gain theme in green, +1/+1 counters. But I think you could definitely put this in any deck, and it's going to give you lots of value. Let's talk about what must be done. This is an interesting card. 3 white sorcery. Choose one. So we got 2 modes here. Destroy all artifacts and creatures. Okay, that's an interesting combination that I don't know if we've actually seen that combination on a card before. Of course, you could do that with an austere command. I guess you would have to pick the certain kind of creature, but the combination of artifacts and creatures is definitely interesting. I don't know if we've ever seen that before. So right away, I'm thinking this seems fantastic in an enchantment tribal deck, right? Because you're just destroying the artifacts and the creatures, and your enchantments get to stick around. So if you're running austere command for that reason, to avoid hitting enchantments, this is just one cheaper. But also, return target historic permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it if it's a creature. So decent, I would say recursion. Obviously, white's pretty good. I would say white is the second best color at recursion, getting things out of the graveyard. So this isn't like the best thing ever, but it's just a nice extra mode, right? This is a pretty decent board wipe. And if you're, I mean, I guess every deck probably wants to return a historic permanent card from the graveyard to the battlefield. I guess maybe if you're doing Saga Tribal, this is probably the best fit because you're not going to hit your Sagas with that first, the board wipe part, because they're enchantments, obviously. And also the historic part, you can get them out of the graveyard. Big historic theme in this set. So if you're doing any deck that has an historic theme, obviously there's going to be a lot of cards you might want to look at from this set. But this is, pretty versatile. And it's, we're on two completely different ends of the spectrum. We got a board wipe and we got recursion on a card in white. Pretty interesting. All right, Excalibur Sword of Eden is definitely a card that I'm sure a lot of people are going to try to cram into some of their decks. It's interesting. 12 mana. Oh, that's a lot. But of course, as I have been saying quite a lot recently, almost always, not always, but almost always whenever you see that giant number on a card now, it's not going to cost that much, right? So it's a legendary artifact equipment. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of historic permanents you control, of course, that being artifacts, legendaries, sagas. So again, we're in the historic theme here, but you don't put this in historic tribal necessarily. I mean, you could, but if you're doing any of those themes, like if you're just doing an artifact deck, this might fit. And in fact, if you're just doing an equipment deck, all your equipment are historic, your mana rocks as well, right? This is going to be reduced by quite a bit in just about any deck, I'd imagine. This is total mana value. So if your commander costs 6, this is just going to cost 6, right? Equipped creature gets +10/+0 and has vigilance. So that is obviously the reason a lot of people are going to want to be playing it, and has equipped legendary creature too, which means you can only equip it to a legendary creature. Unlike, say, a Blackblade, which you have the option, I think, there. This one, you only have the option to equip it to a legendary creature. Now, of course, you can, if you have, some other way to attach equipment to creatures, that will work. But the typical way you equip creatures with that equip ability, this is only going to work on legendary creatures. But of course, there's a lot of decks that want to be doing that. I imagine we're going to see this equipment, not a ton, but we definitely are going to see this equipment in the format without question. Synchronization is a card that we will certainly see in the commander format. 2 blue instant. Return each non-land permanent that's not historic to owner's hand. So again, with the historic theme, and man, this is a pretty good one. 4 mana, instant speed, likely bounce a whole lot of stuff. You're not going to hit the artifacts, which I think is probably the most relevant one here. Although, again, the legendary means you're not going to hit most people's commanders, which could be bad. So that's a reason not to play it. It's going to fit in certain themes for sure. Again, if you're doing the historic tribal, if you're doing an artifact deck, I think this is probably pretty good because you're not going to bounce any of your artifacts. So any artifact deck in blue, which of course there's a ton of those, you might want to consider it. You're not going to hit your artifacts and you're not going to hit your commander. How much are you going to hit of your opponents, right? I mean, they just played a Crater Hoof and they're coming at you. This is going to bounce their Crater Hoof and all their Saproling tokens or Avenger of Zendikar, whatever else they have. Now it's just bouncing it so they can play it again next turn. But this to me looks like is a card that I'm looking at and I'm thinking a lot of people might think, it's just okay. And a lot of people might think it's an absolute blowout. So, as I say all the time about Cyclonic Rift, obviously it is a great card. Okay. It's a great card in the format, people. However, it does just bounce your stuff and then you get to play it again on the next turn. So the same applies here. If I bounce my opponent's Avenger Zendikar, they just play on the next turn, right? So it kind of slows them down for a turn. And obviously, if they have artifacts or their commander in play, it isn't bouncing that. So this is a bit of a tough one to evaluate. This is sort of like, geez, what was that one from March of the Machines that was bouncing non-creature, non-lands or something? And it's like, okay, that looks like it's doing a lot, but how good is it really? That was one that I grabbed a copy of and I tried it on a deck and I didn't love it and I took it out. And this, again, it might be great in certain situations and might feel really bad in certain situations because it's just not getting enough. So it's kind of tough to tell. Definitely usable and definitely a card we're going to see in the format. We are certainly going to see Hystack in the commander format. 1 and a white artifact, pay 2 and tap, target creature you control phases out. That's it. So just instant speed. I phase out my creature, repeatable. I don't know. What else can you say? This is certainly a card that we're going to see in the Commander format a lot. It might even be a little on the annoying side because someone's going to have this on the battlefield and leave 2 mana untapped, and you're going to have a hard time getting their commander, or, I guess any creature, but likely their commander off the battlefield. You're going to have to basically hit this first, right? It's going to be like, I don't know, having a lightning greaves on their commander or something. You're going to have to hit that first and then hit their commander. That's basically the situation. It's certainly going to see play in the format without a question. Getting to the really interesting stuff here. Staff of Eden Vaultz Key, I would say probably would be the card that people are getting most excited about because of, it sort of has that big play feel to it. 6 mana legendary artifact. When Staff of Eden Vaultz Key enters the battlefield, put target legendary permanent card, not named Staff of Eden Vaultz Key, from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you're just playing this, and first of all, it's a colorless recursion option. That alone can make it viable in a lot of decks. So you can just use this to get your commander back. I have an AO deck. Spoiler alert, I'm putting together in paper. I'll be talking about that in a video coming up. And there's a commander that I want to be dying repeatedly. And so any recursion option is good. And it's an artifact theme. Now, this costs 6. That is a lot. But this could work in that deck. It could. Definitely because it has an ETB, though. You can get into some real neat shenanigans here. It also steals creatures, right? From a graveyard onto the battlefield in your control. You can steal stuff out of your opponent's graveyard as well. And then also tap, draw a card for each permanent you control but don't own. So for that reason, now I think people are also almost probably guaranteed going to put this in any of those decks where you're stealing your opponent's stuff all the time, right? If you have 3 of your opponent's things, this is just tap, draw 3 cards. So that seems amazing, right? So I think a slam dunk in any of the I'm stealing my opponent's stuff strategies, which, man, we got to have just an absolute ton of commanders now that are doing, I steal my opponent's creatures, I play stuff off the top of my opponent's libraries, I play stuff from my opponent's hand. There's so many of those commanders now. This probably goes in all of them. And then also we have some really interesting, like maybe in a blink deck, you could play this as well. I mean, it's got to be legendary, but your commander, that covers quite a bit. So it's a really neat card for sure. We got a land here that's definitely going to go in some decks. Abstergo Entertainment. Legendary land, taps to add a colorless. So again, we're in the category of this enters the battlefield untapped, which is good, but taps to add a colorless and has that 1 tap, add 1 mana to a color. So you can mana fix if you want to, if you desperately need to, but probably don't want to use that ability unless you absolutely have to, because it's not super great. Pay 3 and tap, exile Abstergo Entertainment, return up to 1 target historic card from your graveyard to your hand, then exile all graveyards. Wow, that's pretty fantastic, right? That is, first of all, graveyard hate. So it's doing a Scavenger Grounds thing. Obviously, Scavenger Grounds, another card that instantly became a commander staple as soon as it came out, because it is a colorless option for exiling graveyards, and every commander deck needs to be exiling graveyards, as I say all the time. You need graveyard hate in the commander format. This is a great option for that. However, also gets you that historic card from your graveyard to your hand as well. Again, worst case scenario here is my commander dies, and let's say it's on my opponent's turn, because you can do this in instant speed. My opponent casts a board wipe. I let it go to my graveyard rather than putting it back in the command zone, and then 3 mana and tap this and put it back in my hand, because that's a historic card. Regardless of what commander deck you're playing, your commander is guaranteed to be a historic card. So it goes back to my hand, and then on top of that, I get to exile all graveyards. I think I likely, just like with a Scavenger Grounds, I probably wouldn't play this if I'm in a graveyard theme, because I don't want to be exiling my graveyard. But outside of that scenario, this seems like a pretty easy slot into any deck, right? Pretty great land. All right, I got to talk about Templar Knight anytime. And man, we've been seeing this. I won't say we've been seeing this quite a bit lately, but we've been seeing it more for sure. And this is definitely something that needs to be mentioned because it is very relevant in the Commander format. 1 and a white human knight, 3/1 vigilance. Pay 1 and tap 5 untapped attacking creatures you control named Templar Knight. Search your library for a legendary artifact card and put it on the battlefield. Then shuffle. And of course, it says a deck can have any number of cards named Templar Knight. So we now have another card in the Commander format that is doing the any number thing. And again, just like a Shadowborn Apostle, this is one you could definitely build a deck around because obviously it has that tutor effect. So put a bunch of, I could put that Staff of Eden in there, something, right? All I need is a legendary artifact card. There's lots of great ones. Immortal Sun, there's a great legendary artifact card. Again, you can go down the rabbit hole here. You also, as I have mentioned many times before, can do the same name thing here. That is also a strategy that fits with the any number of cards named this thing. Why this is really, really relevant is I believe this is the first one in white, right? We have a bunch in black. We got, of course, the Shattered One Apostles. We got the rats. There's a couple different ones that do the rats. There is, of course, the Persistent Petitioners. I have a Persistent Petitioners deck. So we got the blue one. We have a green one in Slimes Against Humanity. And we have the red one, Dragon's Approach, right? So white was the only color, I believe, that didn't have a card that did this. And now white does. And so there you go. You could easily build a deck around this without a doubt. And possibly people will be doing so. Let's get to my favorite cards from the set. Become Anonymous is a really interesting card. 2 blue instant. Exile target non-token creature you own and the top 2 cards of your library in a face-down pile. Shuffle that pile, then cloak those cards. They enter the battlefield tapped. So, of course, Cloak. I mean, they revisited Disguise and Cloak in this set because, of course, fits the whole assassin theme. Obviously, we got that from Murders of Karlov Manor recently. And of course, it means the cards are manifested, but also have Ward 2, so you can flip them up if they're creatures, right? The 2 cards that you manifest off the top of your library, obviously, if they're creatures, you can flip them over. But if you have another way to flip them over, you can also flip them over, right? Like a ghostly flicker, some flickering effect will work as well. So that can be relevant, but this is just such a neat card. There's a lot of different ways you can use this. You can just use it to protect my commander, right? So I have a commander and it's about to get removed. I exile it and flip it over, right? And of course, I mean, the flavor here is fantastic, right? You're hiding in the crowd. You can kind of think of this, funny enough, because it is 3 cards. Creature that you're exiling plus 2 others. It's sort of like 3-card Monty, right? Like, which one is it? It's sort of like a game of 3-card Monty. And another interesting thing you can do here is if you have a commander you want to get in for damage, you can do the 3-card Monty thing and your opponent only has 1 blocker. Which one do they block? Which one's your commander? And of course, if they pick the wrong one, then you flip your commander over and you get whatever, commander damage or, whatever the trigger is, something like that. So that's another neat way to use this card. Also, it is exile target non-token creature you own. So it is also a way to get your creatures back. If someone steals your commander or another one of your creatures, you'll just take it back. Yoink. I'll put that into play. You're also manifesting the top cards of your library. Could be a neat fit in any morph theme where you're doing the face up, face down thing as well. Pretty neat card. I like it a lot. Maybe my favorite card from the set, I think. I just really like cards like this, is Smoke Bomb. And again, really great flavor here. 3 mana artifact with flash. All creatures have Shroud. So this card flashes in and just gives all creatures Shroud. And I gotta say, I love that they're bringing Shroud back. I love it. Obviously, Hexproof came around and the mentality became, which I always thought was very weird. Oh, why would you ever print Shroud again? Because Hexproof is just better. Okay, what's better got to do with it? Double Strike is better than First Strike, so I guess we'll just stop printing First Strike and only print Double Strike? Like, what's better got to do with anything? They're different. And especially on this card, the difference is very relevant. I like Shroud. First of all, I find it to be a fair version of Hexproof, because I don't find Hexproof to be very fair. It's busted. But also, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I mentioned this in a video recently about, I think it was Alexi's Cloak, where there's a card that instant speed and gives the creature Shroud. And of course, I can flash it in to give my creature protection in response to removal. But also, because Shroud says that creature just can't be the target of spells or abilities at all, I can use it on my opponent's creature. So if my opponent has a Voltron commander and they're about to throw some equipment on it or give it something, in response, I can flash out the Alexi's Cloak, give it Shroud, so they can't target their own commander. That is a really handy way to use a card like that, and that's why I really like this card. It gives all creatures Shroud. So because it's not giving Hexproof, it actually is better because it's giving Shroud, because now we can flash this in to protect our creatures. Yes, this is a colorless option for protecting my stuff, and I think I'm absolutely going to put this in my colorless deck. Someone's targeting some important creature of mine, maybe my commander, maybe something else. I flash this in, all creatures have Shroud, and the removal spell will fizzle. However, I can also use it in that scenario where my opponent wants to put stuff on their own creatures, or wouldn't you know it, this is a fantastic card against that commander that everyone has been complaining about recently, Nadu. This is an anti-Nadu card where that person is about to go off on their turn and you know it. They're playing the Nadu deck. Let's see how long that card sticks around before it gets banned. I don't know, a lot of people are saying it. We'll see. But on their upkeep, you flash this in. All creatures have Shroud. Now their commander essentially does nothing because they can't target any other creatures, right? So this card, again, I don't know if everyone is seeing the possibilities here. This is why I like Shroud over Hexproof, because you can use it on your opponent's creatures as well. I love cards that you can use possibly on your opponent's stuff or on yours. However, we also have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Smoke Bomb. When you do, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn, so this isn't going to stick around forever. Of course, I think it would be way too powerful if it did, right? Just giving all creatures Shroud is an incredibly powerful effect for 3 mana. Because of all the scenarios I just mentioned, nobody's allowed to target their stuff, right? So it's actually too good. But you can flash this in on your opponent's turn. They can't target any stuff, and then your next opponent and your next opponent, and they all can't target their stuff, which can be good. And then on your turn, it gets sacrificed. So now you can target your own stuff, which can be a good thing. And then also make one of your creatures unblockable. Sure, pretty good too. I love this card. It is for sure my favorite card from this set. So there you go. I think I talked about 10 cards here. 10 really interesting cards, and cards that I think for sure we're going to see from this set in the Commander format. I might grab a couple. I really like that Smoke Bomb. I think I might grab maybe at least one of those and throw it in one of my decks. I think it's a really neat card. There's another card that I didn't talk about in this video that just happens to fit really nicely into one of my decks. You guys let me know in the comments below if you're grabbing any cards from this set for your Commander decks and what they are. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.